This video is sponsored by Delete Me. In the vast emptiness of Kazakhstan's steppes lie the peaceful waters of Lake Shagan. This pristine mirror of blue stretches 400 yards across and partially feeds a larger reservoir beyond. But something feels wrong. The lake's rim rises unnaturally high above the surrounding plain, like the lip of a giant bowl pressed into the earth. No birds circle overhead. No fish break the surface. The water holds an unsettling stillness, as if time itself has frozen around it. There's something else. Its shape. The lake is a perfect circle, the kind that nature simply doesn't draw. On the shore, more pieces of the puzzle can be found. A concrete bunker at the water's edge, its walls pockmarked with strange scars. A crumbling city in the distance, its streets completely empty. It all points to the shocking truth behind Lake Chagan and its origins in one of the Cold War's strangest experiments. Unraveling the mysteries of Lake Chagan pulls you into a web of Cold War secrets and classified information. But while we dig through history, there are people doing the same with your personal data. Every day, data brokers scour the internet, collecting, packaging, and selling your information without your consent. Your name, address, phone number, even details about your relatives. It's all being traded in the shadows. And once it's out there, it can be used for anything. Relentless spam calls, identity theft, phishing scams, and even more serious threats. That's why we at Dark Footage trust Delete Me, a service that tracks down and removes personal information from hundreds of data broker sites. Within days of signing up, our Delete Me dashboard revealed just how many places have been hosting our private data, without us ever knowing. Their privacy experts work year-round to monitor and eliminate our information, ensuring it stays out of reach. And this isn't just about protecting yourself. When your data is exposed, your family's information often gets swept up in it too. That's why Delete Me offers family plans, keeping your loved ones secure. Take back control of your digital privacy today. Enter the link in the description and use promo code DARKFOOTAGE for 20% off your subscription. The sooner you act, the less of your data will be out there. Context. In the late 1950s, at the height of the bitter arms and technology race between the United States and the Soviet Union, an audacious idea was proposed. American scientists began work on a new project called Operation Plowshare. The name came from a phrase from the Bible that talked of beating swords into plowshares, transforming weapons of war into useful peacetime tools. But rather than swords, they planned to create a force for good out of something far more powerful: nuclear bombs. Their vision was radical. They would harness the extreme force of nuclear explosions, not for destruction, but to serve humanity by excavating harbors, carving canals, and creating reservoirs in a fraction of the time traditional methods required. Determined not to be outdone, soon after Operation Plowshare got underway, the Soviets followed suit with their own program called Nuclear Explosions for the National Economy. Their ambitions were even grander than their American rivals. Where nature had failed to provide, Soviet science would succeed. Barren deserts could be transformed into oases. Mountains could be moved. The very shape of the Earth itself could be reformed. The US program ended in 1977 after conducting 27 tests. Meanwhile, the Soviets continued their program until 1989, carrying out over 150 peaceful nuclear explosions. But none would be quite as ambitious or as controversial as the blast that created Lake Shagan. The test. The site for the experiment was chosen carefully. At the edge of the vast Semipalatinsk test site, the Soviet team found the perfect location where the Shagan River met its tributary, the Ashkisu. Here, the steppe's natural geography could be turned to their advantage. A precisely placed explosion would create a crater that would dam the river during its spring floods, providing water for the region's cattle. The Soviets had studied American experiments, particularly the 1962 Sedan test, and believed they could improve upon them. For months, engineers and scientists planned every detail. They calculated the exact depths needed, 584 feet below the riverbed. They determined the precise explosive yield required, 140 kilotons of nuclear force. They even planned for the aftermath, designing a channel that would connect the crater to the river system. On January 15th, 1965, in the pre-dawn darkness of the Kazakh winter, Soviet engineers made their final preparations. At precisely 5:59 a.m., the device detonated. A blinding flash lit up the winter sky as the Earth itself seemed to erupt. The explosion threw 1 million tons of radioactive soil high into the atmosphere, creating a column of debris that stretched over 3,000 feet into the sky. When the dust settled, a massive crater had been carved into the steppe, around 330 feet deep and a quarter of a mile across. In the months that followed, workers used conventional explosives to cut a channel connecting the crater to the Shagan River. They constructed a stone and earthen dam with culverts to control water levels. By all outward appearances, the Soviets had achieved something unprecedented. They had used nuclear power to reshape the landscape itself. Propaganda. The Soviet government was quick to celebrate their achievement. In a triumphant propaganda film, they showcased their mastery over nature itself. The footage follows the explosion's aftermath as spring meltwater fills the crater, transforming the barren steppe into a seemingly idyllic lake. The camera lingers on peaceful scenes, cattle drinking from the reservoir, birds skimming the water's surface, a picture of nuclear-powered prosperity. But the film's most striking moment came when Efrem Slavsky, the minister responsible for the entire Soviet nuclear weapons program, arrived at the lake. In an extraordinary display of confidence, Slavsky stripped down to his swimming trunks and dove into the crater's waters. The message was clear. If the man in charge of the program would swim in the lake, surely it must be safe. Behind this carefully choreographed display, however, a more troubling reality was emerging. Radioactive debris from the explosion had been detected as far away as Japan, infuriating the United States, who accused the Soviets of violating the 1963 Limited Test Ban Treaty. The Soviets publicly dismissed these concerns, but privately, their own scientists were beginning to understand the true costs of their ambition. Still, the propaganda machine pressed on. The lake's water was used to feed local cattle, and officials continued to praise this triumph of Soviet engineering. The truth about Lake Chagan's radioactive legacy would remain hidden for decades. Impact. The environmental impact of the creation of Lake Chagan began immediately. Around 20% of the radioactive material from the blast escaped into the atmosphere, creating a plume that drifted east across the continent. When traces of radiation were detected over Japan, it sparked an international incident. The United States protested vigorously, but Soviet officials maintained that the effect of the underground explosion on the planet was insignificant. The reality told a different story. Tests revealed that the lake's water contained radiation levels 100 times higher than the safe limit for drinking water. The soil around the crater was laced with various radioactive elements: americium-241, cobalt-60, and cesium-137, their half-lives ensuring the land would remain contaminated for generations. Nature itself seemed to reject this artificial intrusion into the landscape. No fish could survive in the contaminated waters. Birds avoided the area. The occasional animal that did drink from the reservoir risked a lethal dose of radiation. Even today, nearly 60 years after the explosion, radiation levels at the crater's edge remain dangerously high. Despite clear warnings from authorities, some locals still fish in the lake's waters, a testament to either desperate necessity or a fatalistic acceptance of the nuclear legacy that scars their homeland. Shagan Town. The radioactive waters weren't the only thing that the Soviet nuclear program left the lake and its surrounding areas. Just a few miles from the crater stands the ghostly remains of what was once a bustling military community. Over 10,000 people once lived here in the town of Shagan, its streets filled with the families of military personnel who worked at the nearby airfield and nuclear test site. Today, the town is frozen in time. Rows of Soviet-style apartment blocks stand empty, their windows long since shattered, their walls crumbling under decades of exposure to the harsh steppe climate. Beyond the town lies the abandoned military airbase, its double runway still visible, though overtaken by weeds. The main terminal building stands sentinel, its faded Soviet red star a reminder of former glory. Nearby, tunnel-like bunkers that once stored weapons now lie empty, their secrets sealed behind rusted doors. The end came swiftly. With the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Funding disappeared. By 1994, the military presence had almost completely disappeared. Families packed what they could carry and left, abandoning their homes to the relentless entropy of time and nature. At the town's entrance, a poignant memorial marks their departure, a pyramid-shaped block of granite bearing the image of a military aircraft and a message that reads, quote, "Part of our hearts remain here forever. People of Shagan of different times and countries, 1954 to 1994. Present day. Since gaining independence, Kazakhstan has transformed its nuclear testing legacy into a unique part of its heritage. The same steppes that once trembled with nuclear detonations now host nature reserves and skiing facilities. Yet Lake Chagan remains unchanged, a perfectly circular window into one of history's strangest experiments. The former Semipalatinsk test site, including Lake Shagan, has become an unlikely tourist destination for those seeking to understand the Cold War's atomic legacy. Visitors must observe strict precautions when approaching the lake. Protective clothing is mandatory, and guides carefully monitor radiation levels as they lead tour groups around the crater's edge. From a safe distance, tourists photograph the unnaturally perfect circle of blue water, a sight as beautiful as it is lethal. A special thanks to Delete Me for supporting this video. If you want to reduce your digital footprint and protect your privacy, check out Delete Me at the link in the description and use promo code DARKFOOTAGE for 20% off. The internet never forgets, but you can make it forget about you.